Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve. We know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where does the nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? This podcast is designed to help you find your catalyst, take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I am the managing partner of Catalyst Acts. My catalyst today is Will Shaw. Will is a friend. He's a former NFL football player. He is an entrepreneur, and he is the CEO of Better Agency. And we have an awesome conversation that bridges the discussion relative to golf and business and life and competition and transferable skills. And you are going to enjoy this conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. This episode, as every episode, is brought to you by the Catalyst Game Plan. It's our approach to goal setting and execution. If you head to findmycatalyst.com, you will find more information there. Thanks. Well, it's good to see you. It's not like I don't see you often these days. We've been fortunate enough to get out on the golf course a couple of times recently. Probably sometimes we get on a couple of times a week. So you've seen the highs and lows of my mental state. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. We've talked about it for a while. So yeah.
So one of the things that I think people will find interesting is transferable skills from being a professional athlete and moving into the business world, like both as an individual contributor and now operating a business. So how'd you make this? What was the shift like from playing sports for a living to going out and getting a real job or going out into the workplace?
Yeah, it's a good question. I grew up kind of understanding the entrepreneurship kind of journey. My dad was, one of my earliest memories of childhood is like my dad just doing taxes on the kitchen room table at like 2 a.m. in the morning. I just kind of like always remembered that. And, it's the same lessons, right? Like, in sports and football, I was kind of thought, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. Outwork. If you're the hardest worker in the room, everything will fall into place. Just outwork everybody. I never viewed myself as like the smartest person. I was actually towards the bottom of my graduating class. Whereas like my brother and sister were, top 5 in their class and things like that. I just figured I'd outwork everybody. And so when I was transitioning from football out of football, I just tried to take that I didn't go right into entrepreneurship. I went in and got a job actually where my wife worked at a tech company. That's kind of how I got my start. But I took those same ideas, right? Outwork everybody, see what everybody else is doing. And how do I find a way to be better than whatever it is everybody's doing? What's the status quo and how do I go above and beyond that? To accelerate what it is that I need to learn to accelerate my own performance. And so that was probably the most transferable skill that I knew, which was just to take that same type of mindset and go headfirst in anything I did.
And you were at Infusionsoft first, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I was there for about a year and a half I was there.
So you had a chance. Did you work with Greg Head over there, or was Greg still there?
Yeah, that's how I got. So yeah, my wife worked for Greg Head in the marketing team. And so I get to know people over at Infusionsoft before I was ever worked there. And I remember that when we kind of decided, me and my wife, that I was done playing football, I started applying for jobs. I was sending out resumes everywhere, and I would always get a call back. I'd always get a call back. And all they wanted to do was talk to me about football. But they're like, yeah, no, we're not offering you this job. You have no real work experience. And so I remember my first job was at LA Fitness. So I went from playing in the NFL to working at LA Fitness. And then my wife and I quickly decided, well, this isn't worth it. And then basically referred me over to work at Infusionsoft. We figured, well, Infusionsoft's hiring, they're growing, might as well get a job there. And the hiring team there, I think, just really enjoyed the fact that I was a football player and willing to work hard. And I self-taught myself the software from YouTube videos. And they were willing to take a flyer on me. And I'm very appreciative I did. But to answer your question, yeah, I knew Greg Head, and I've known him pretty well since.
So let's break down on the football side of things. And tell me about football as a job. Like, how is football a job, playing football at a professional level?
Yeah, I think it all depends on your mindset. Like, you can see pretty early on who is taking football as a career choice versus who's playing football for fun. And you can see that at the high school level. I was able to see it. Like, my mindset was, all right, as a kid, the goal was always, okay, how to play in the NFL, right? Like, let's play in the NFL, right? That's every boyhood child's dream, right? That was my dream. And so when I go back, I think all the way back to football, like my freshman year, it's like, well, I got to be a starter on the freshman team. And I go my sophomore year, it's like, be a starter on the JV team, try to make it up to varsity. And it's my junior year, it's like, be a starter, be all conference. And it was like, be a starter, be all state. And I just figured like that was the next thing. It's like, all right, I was all state. I was not a 5-star recruit. I was a 0-star recruit. It's kind of a running joke in my family. So I was a 0-star recruit. I had a lot of inbound interest from a lot of different schools. My senior year, I broke my ankle. And so I ended up going to Mesa Community College here locally. And so like when I went to Mesa Community College, it was like, be a starter, be all conference. And so I was. And the first scholarship I got, my mom had like stage 4 breast cancer at the time. And so in my mind, I was like, the first full ride scholarship I get, I am taking because I have no other way to get through school. And so Youngstown State called me up and offered me to go on a visit, and they offered me a full ride scholarship. I said, I will take it. So I was a sophomore at that point, and the mindset was like, figure out how to get on the field. And so I got on the field and I bounced around positions, and then it was like, it just kept doing it. Like for me, it was always like, what's the next step that I need to do to accomplish my end goal? Like I broke it down in those little chunks. So all the way back to high school was like, I've got to work hard to be a starter. I got to work hard to achieve these goals in order to get to the next step. And so you could see the difference all the way back in high school of kids that were, all right, I'm treating this as like my business, like my life, and I'm going to go about my business seriously versus, hey, I'm playing high school football and I'm having a lot of fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that, like, you saw that divide as early as working with 15, 16, 17-year-olds. I can see that now when I'm like working with kids in the community. There is a divide there. There's kids that are going out and thinking, how do I get better in the off season? I'm working with coaches, things like that, versus, hey, I'm just happy to be on the football team and this is part of my life experience. It's not going to be anything more than that for me, and that's totally fine. And so that amplifies as you go to college and you see, all right, guys who are saying, all right, I want to make a career out of playing football. I'm trying to go after this, versus the guys who are like, hey, I have no desire to play professional football. That existed. And then when you get to the NFL, it's a whole different level. That was probably the most culture shock to me, was going from a group of college kids that are all between the ages of 17 and 23 to, hey, I'm now the youngest person on this team. The average age is 28, 29 years old. Most guys have families and they are there to collect a paycheck. It is very much about your business. I think Youngstown did a good job trying to prepare that for me, but we were a small school, so I don't think the average player there was looking at football that way. So when you walk into a locker room and everybody's about their business, there is an expectation, because if you mess up, it could cost somebody else potentially, what their next contract could be. If you mess up, if they get hurt, if you're not able to win as many games because you're not good at your job, that's going to affect what somebody can make in their next contract.
There are a couple of things that come up in the story as you shared. One, dealing with adversity. Two, having a process that you're going out and working. And then three, understanding the importance of accountability to both working through adversity, working through the process, and getting the work done. Do either of those three jump out at you that you'd want to go deeper into, or do you want me just to start asking questions?
Start asking questions. All three of them are really important to me. I'm very much a believer in trust the process, brick by brick. I don't think there's shortcuts, but I'm also very much somebody that believes you have to face adversity. You got to find that obstacle and figure out a way through it or over it. And if you don't, it'll just keep coming back.
So let's talk about the adversity thing. Broken ankle, mom breast cancer. That's a lot of crap to deal with as a young kid. How do you go through? What's your process for compartmentalizing and maintaining focus?
Yeah. What's funny about life is you always find this way to go up and you get high, and life always has a way of bringing you back down, right? If there's constant, I don't believe there's an end in life. It's about the journey. I believe that just constant ebb and flows of life is you start getting high and then life will find a way to bring you back down. And that's just kind of one of the things I approach it with now is I learned this from one of my coaches I was really close with, is things are never as bad or ever as good as you think they are. And I try to maintain that level, that kind of level set. I can't control everything. All I can control is how I react to things. That's something my parents taught me. I can't control what happens in life. All I can control is my reactions to them. And so I remember I was 18 years old, probably cocky as old get out. And because I've got U of A coming to our door, San Diego State there. It's me and my best friend who played baseball, still plays professional baseball. It's we're playing N64, and I've got San Diego State and U of A and people coming in and meeting with me. And then 2 hours later, we've got the Devil Rays coming in, and we've got the New York Yankees coming and meeting with him. And that's just not what you should do to 16, 17, 18-year-old guys. It's just not, if you want to watch an ego go through the roof, that's how you do it.
In Mesa, Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Were you in Mesa? Yeah. So not really the most well-known space. This is a big baseball recruitment, but at the time football was very overlooked.
in the valley. It was not a big pipeline. And so, yeah, so I broke my ankle, missed some games. I ended up playing, but I was a 0-star recruit, had no real offers. It was all D2. And I was, hey, I'm a D1 football player. I'm a D1 football player. And Mesa Community College called me up and said, hey, well, we'll give you a scholarship, come to Mesa Community College. So I ended up playing there and going there for a year. And I remember during that season, my mom, who was a nurse, her friend had a lump in her breast, and they had like the free services at the time. It was October. It was like, come check, for breast cancer awareness, whatever.
Yep.
And so my mom was like, hey, we're going to get up early. We're going to go before work. We'll go at 7:00. So my mom meets in downtown Phoenix, all the way from at the time living in Gilbert, and drives out there, and her friend doesn't show up. My mom gets checked. My mom decides, hey, I'll get checked. I'm here. I might as well do it. And they come back with the head doctor, and they're like, hey, you have stage 4 breast cancer. Like, the odds of living are like here. It's not great. And this is reality. And so I was like, well, all right, well, maybe I should quit football. I'll just become a firefighter, try to get through college as quickly as possible. And we make it through that. My mom was super strong. My mom's been in recession since, she's 10 plus years. But it was just a really interesting moment of like me evaluating whether football was going to be a part of my life or not. I remember because my mom was going through chemo. She finally started to lose her hair. I remember when we shaved her head, that was the first and only time I ever saw my mom cry going through everything with breast cancer. And it was like the next day, I got faxed the paperwork from Youngstown State saying, hey, here's a $100,000 check. Come play football at Youngstown, room, board, education, everything's covered. And it was just a really emotional moment. And my younger brother and younger sister ended up getting scholarships as well for football, as well as track for my sister, just to remove that pressure because of how expensive the cancer treatments were. It was just a really powerful and impactful moment in my life. And yeah, it was just kind of kept battling through that. So that was kind of, how we transitioned from the ankle to, through breast cancer, and then eventually to, how I got to Youngstown.
What were the conversations like with your mom back then as you're going through like this battle of, hey, maybe I should just be a firefighter and start work through that process and bring money in because to help support cost versus this follow the dream of being able to go out there and play the game?
Yeah. I mean, I think there was some realism there, but I'll tell you what, the one thing I'm really grateful for my parents is they gave me the space to dream big. I remember being a freshman or sophomore year in high school, and all the recruiting services came out and they're like, hey, if you're not already talking to schools, you're never going to play D1 football. It's just not happening. This just isn't going to happen to you. And my parents are like, hey, if you want to go play D1 football, we're going to do everything we can to help support you do that. We may not have the most money in the world to pay for everything, but if this is what you want to do, let's go do it. And all it takes is one team. It takes one opportunity. And I'm a firm believer that. But my parents just gave me so much space to really believe that if I can dream it, if I can visualize it, if I can speak it into existence, I've got to work at it. But if I want to do that, I can do anything. And so even in those moments of going through breast cancer and kind of having to take a step back, my dad's older, at the time he was well retired. And we're just like, hey, we're going to figure this out. We're not going to have you give up on your dream. We're just going to figure it out. I ended up working odd end jobs to just help in between school and then training and things like that, setting up bounce houses. I tried to interview at Cinnabon at some point, different things, just trying to figure out until I kind of just shipped out to Youngstown. And then my parents really gave me, my family really gave me the opportunity to say just worry about playing football. And they always kind of gave that space to me.
It's pretty powerful when you can have that space and that level of support. How about the process stuff? What's the process stuff look like when you talk to trust the process, commitment to the process? What's your process for getting out there and getting things done?
Again, I think it's especially now that I've become a parent, I just look back to how I was raised, and I came from a military family. My dad worked, not just military, but worked for the government. Everything was process oriented. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you make your bed, but you don't just do those things. If you're going to do it, you do them right. If you're not going to do them right, don't do them. And if you don't do them, there's going to be consequences. You just get up and do things the right way. And that, if you're going to, don't, and I think I've learned this more about as I've gotten older, but don't fall in love with trying to get to some kind of destination, because what I've learned is once you get there, there's another level. And so you're going to miss out on the happiness that comes for A, the journey, but B, getting to some version of a destination, right? Some kind of stepping stone or whatever it is. Because by the time you get there, you're already focused 2 or 3 steps ahead, especially if you're an ambitious person. And so what I've tried to really focus on is, can you fall in love with the journey? Can you fall in love with, I tell people all the time, they're like, do you miss football? I was like, well, I miss aspects of it. Sure, I miss the locker room. I don't miss how my body felt. Look, I feel way better at 32 than I did at 23. But what I do miss is like in the off season, waking up at like 3:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, going to a 5 a.m. workout when it's 10 degrees outside and having an hour long workout. And then people showing up for a 6 a.m. workout. And I've already got after it for an hour. Like the amount of kind of power I felt like that I showed the team that nothing else mattered. Like I had an hour plus workout by the time you got there at 6 a.m. Like I've already got through a different workout. Now I'm going to join you guys for a workout and lead you through it. And by the way, I'm going to do stuff afterwards after you guys left. And then I'm going to be back here later today doing field work for anybody that wants to join me. Like when you can captivate people to go do that, like I miss that stuff. I miss the like mental games that I could play with people of like, you literally cannot outwork me. You can't defeat me. No matter what happens, I can't be beat because I'm willing to put in the work in. Like whatever you did in a week, like if you worked out for 10 hours this week, I probably put in 20. It's just the reality. Whatever you did, I was willing to do double. And there's probably some unhealthy levelness to that, especially with some rest and things like that. But I miss that part. I love the process. I love the work. Like I still get up at 4:30 in the morning and I love going through a grueling workout. Like it's just, that is the evolution and the process of, okay, now I'm focused on longevity. Like how do I stay healthy when I'm 70, 80, 90 years old? It's like, well, how can I keep my fitness at the highest possible level and continue to get better so that at some point when I do start deteriorating, I push that off as long as possible. And I'm already at such a high level that it's going to take so long to deteriorate. Now it's like, all right, well, this is like for the next 40, 50 years, as long as I can push it.
So how do you think about competition?
I think of that as internal, not external. I'm very much a believer. And so this gets hard to me when you're doing like competitive analysis, especially in business. Like what are competitors doing? Like I'm very much like, I don't care what, like I can't control external events. I can only control internal. Yeah. So that goes to competition too. It's like on football, it was like, well, the only way I'm going to control the competitors or competition is like, how prepared am I? Can I be more prepared than they are? Right. So like that's working, being physically ready, but like how much film am I willing to watch? How much am I willing to study this? Like, how do I know exactly what's going on? And I look at the same thing in businesses, but I think of everything as internal. Like, how do we internally compete against ourselves? How can I internally compete against myself? Like, it's like the little metric of like, can I go a little bit further? Can I go a little bit faster? Can I kind of take those stepping blocks a little bit further versus like, what's anybody else doing? I really don't care because I have no control over that.
Let's shift into accountability. So you've got no control over it on the external, but you've got a significant amount of control over the internal and kind of where you focus time, energy, and attention. How do you think about personal accountability?
I'm very much like a no excuses mindset. I know things happen, like, but if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. So I prep for that when I have to drive from Queen Creek to Phoenix. Like, I assume there's going to be a car accident. I'm going to have to go and get delayed somewhere, and I have to work around that. Personal accountability to me is like, what are your standards in life? What are your habits you've created? Because like whenever things get tough, you're going to fall back on your habits. So like you start going through a tough period in business, you start going through a tough series in football or sports or whatever it is, you start going through a tough patch in your marriage, any of those things, it's like, well, what are your habits so you can fall back on, right? And to me, that's where my personal accountability lives. Like, what are the habits I'm going to fall back during the stressful times of my life? And what I know is I'm going to get up earlier than most people. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to train harder. I'm going to study. I'm going to journal. I'm going to write. Like those are my personal accountability measures. And I show up, and it's just very much a no excuses mindset. Like no matter what, somebody's going to have it better than I have it, and somebody's going to have it worse than I have it. So I might as well show up because at the end of the day, nobody else cares what I'm going through. You just got to show up. I kind of take peace in just that process of no matter what's going on, you just kind of have to show up.
How does that shift to accountability to team? Because you start talking about like as you move through and you get into these other levels of playing the game, at NFL level, now you not showing up or somebody else taking your place and showing up instead of you has a direct impact on the person next to you's contract or the person who's part of that team. So how does the personal accountability translate team accountability and accountability to others?
Yeah, I think other people, when you're around other people, they see it and then whoever's setting the culture of that accountability, that's going to spread throughout the team. And it can be fast and it can be very slow. And it just depends. Like when I started running morning workouts and then doing afternoon training, I might have only had 2 or 3 guys in the afternoon coming with me when I first got to Youngstown. But by the time I was leaving Youngstown, I had a group of 15, 20 people running drills out there in the afternoon. It's like, I'm not going to get everybody, and that's okay. I don't necessarily need everybody. And not everybody has to do that to be successful. But the reality was I was able to bring people along on that journey because that's what I believed. And they were able to up-level their game, not up-level the team's game. And I think about it the same in business. It's like if I show up and I set a standard at our company, it's a little bit easier as a CEO, but if I set the standard of we got to show up, there's no excuse to just, we meet deadlines, we're very clear on what we're trying to do, then that's going to distribute to my direct reports and it's going to distribute to their direct reports, right? But if I set the standard of, oh, okay, we missed this deadline, it's not a big deal, or okay, we're going to just kind of explain away what these metrics mean because we don't really want to talk about them. Well, that's going to also spread throughout the team. And I've had different seasons of where I've had to work with our team to make sure we're not spreading around those kind of attributes.
Why do organizations struggle with this kind of leadership from your perspective?
It's a good question. I don't know. I struggle with it sometimes too. I mean, so I can only think about my struggles with it, but I think it has a lot to do with like what's going on in anybody's personal life. Like I haven't met a lot of successful founders that don't have a successful home life. Mm-hmm. Like if somebody's going through turmoil at home, I generally see them go through turmoil at work, whether that's in a leadership or non-leadership role. I've just seen a 2 and 2 go to hand. I think if one's out of whack, the other one starts going out of whack as well. I think that could be part of it. I think I hear a lot like, hey, we're a family here. I tell our team all the time, like, we are not a family. We're not, like, because that means I'm going to love you no matter what. And that's just not true. Like that's a harsh reality that I think people don't want to face. Is like, I'm not going to love you no matter what. The reality is, in my experience, that if you end up leaving the company or I leave the company, we're probably not going to communicate as much as we do now. That's just the reality. Like I have my family, right? And people that I consider family. I don't need to necessarily add to that. We are a team. And what that means is I'm including myself. Like I'm constantly looking at how do we get better? Like I'm as CEO, like I view my position as on the chopping block. Like if I can't grow and become a better CEO that we need, if I'm not the CEO we need in 6 months from now, then my job is also on the chopping block. But like, I'm also looking at everybody's job as how do we get better? It's free agency. Like if we need to get better, then we need to improve. Now that could be investing in training and resources and growth, or that could be, hey, we need to start adding some other team members to up level what they're doing, or there might need to be changes. Like this is not a family. I will not love you no matter what. That is a harsh reality. I don't think people are comfortable saying enough, but that's the truth. We are a team. As much as I love the Eagles, they didn't love me. I wasn't staying there no matter what. I was cut like a grand total of like 4 or 5 times because at times they need me, at times they don't. And so when they don't need me, I can go somewhere else. That's something I'm comfortable with, but I don't think a lot of people in business are super comfortable with. I think it's uncomfortable to be in those situations and to have those conversations. But that's what I've tried to tell the team is like, hey, listen, we are a high performing team. What that means is like, everybody's constantly getting evaluated, myself included, because we got to be performing at the highest level.
I don't know if you're going to jump into a rendition of Let It Go here, but that's the song that's going around in my head. Sometimes you just have to let things go. You have to let people go. You have to let work go. You have to let objectives go. You have to let yourself go and fire yourself if you're not in the right place or the right person for that right time. So what's your decision-making process for letting things go?
Yeah, I say all that and I do struggle with it. Like I have maybe a loyalty complex, where I have hired fast and fired slow, and it probably should be the opposite. You need to hire slow and fire fast. And I've learned the hard way those mistakes of holding on too long. And so I'm a lot better at it. And now I'm very much, you kind of have to feel like you have to go through this, and you get to the point where you almost get a little callous to it. That may sound unhealthy, but I think it's good. You have to be okay with being able to let go and move quickly. Like I believe in movement, and I don't want to just go undirectionally and just be moving to move, but I believe in constant intentional movement. I don't believe in long drawn out sessions of strategy to maybe think about where we're going. I want to be moving. I just want to be going in the right direction. And so to do that, I think you got to be able to let go of things quickly.
I think this is where that whole being able to make decisions, committing to things and taking action is really, really clear. And being comfortable with the idea of, hey, I've got to evaluate my feedback loops and determine, is this thing working? Yeah. I know one of the things you've shared is you use is a tonal. Is that your, that's your, so you've got this piece of tech that didn't exist 10 years ago that now is changing the way that you think about and actually go through your workouts. What kind of impact is that technology having on your workout, and how did you go through the process of saying, hey, I'm going to go ahead and keep doing it rather than go through and get back to doing the traditional meathead movements and throwing weight around. Like you wouldn't know if you didn't actually start using it. You weren't able to,
Right.
you wouldn't know if you didn't see the results. You wouldn't know if you didn't see the impact. I just wonder how many people get caught in this loop of strategy, but miss the opportunity to take action. And then as a result, don't have any feedback associated with it other than people's opinions because we're talking through what might be rather than what is.
Yeah, I think, like using that example is, somebody that takes health and nutrition very seriously. I'm in tune with my body enough to know I don't need a massive feedback cycle. I can tell you within a day, couple days, a week, exactly what's changed and how that's impacted. And I can make an educated bet based off that. And that's what I was able to do with the tonal. And when I take that over to business, I think a lot of people are just not in tune enough with exactly what's going on and what they're working towards and what people are doing at their companies. I don't think they're in tune enough to say, this isn't right. And so now you end up in these long drawn out cycles of feedback loops and opinions and strategy and maybe some different pivots. Whereas just like the tonal example at Better Agency, I'm trying to be in tune to say, I can tell you that this isn't working by Wednesday and we're going to have a whole different strategy from what we had on Monday by Friday. Like I'm trying to move that quickly to the point where it annoys people because I want that constant pressure of going.
It's one of the things that drives me absolutely nuts when I see people talk about, well, you need to talk with 100 customers. No, you don't. Talk with 10. 10 is going to give you enough information where you're going to determine, do I need to go deeper into this or do I need to stop or do I need to do something else? Like that's, right. And I think that's a really cool piece to highlight is that level of awareness of whatever the operating environment is, in this instance, level of awareness of your body, the amount of times that you have to go through that feedback loop or that repetition is not an infinite number to get data. There's going to be some kind of diminishing returns that happen after the first couple of rotations. So the cycle doesn't have to be long and drawn out, but you do have to work the cycle. Is that fair?
Yes, I agree.
So let's talk about lessons learned on the golf course, given that we've got all of this stuff in this, we see these things that just apply. It's all the same stuff. We deal with adversity on the golf course. I had 3 penalty strokes on a freaking 9 yesterday. And now I'm dating the podcast, but that probably happens once every couple of weeks. How does playing the game of golf impact the way you think about family and business?
Yeah, I mean, I love playing golf and I just like being outside and doing something. And it's like the pinnacle of my athletic performance now at this point is my golf game. But it's interesting. Like there's certain things we talk about, like don't let one bad shot lead into 2 bad shots. And it's like just that alone of like, don't let one bad decision lead into, a string of bad decisions, right? Don't let one bad outburst or bad interaction with your family lead into a day's worth of bad interactions, right? Being able to like just take a step back and find your core principles and now be able to move forward. Like, hey, I made a mistake. It's okay. I'm human. That's obviously going to happen. Don't hit 2 bad shots in a row. I really like that with golf and how that translates. And even like it's, and I think this is true of life because you can't control everything in your life. You hit a perfect shot and it ends up really bad. It's just unlucky. Like that shit happens. That is life. Like you can't control everything. Like you can do everything right and it may just not work out. And alternatively, you may have done every absolutely thing wrong and it worked out, but you got to be able to have enough self-evaluation to realize that was a terrible shot or that was a terrible decision in business. It worked out by the skin of our teeth. We got lucky. And like, I've been a prisoner of that with Better Agency even. Like we've done things that were terrible. They were just not good. And because it worked, it was like, hey, this is fine because we didn't have that self-evaluation to say, I think with golf, it's a little bit easier. It's like, well, yeah, I hit like a massive low hook and it just happened to hit off the mound and then back to the pin. It was a great shot, but it was really terrible. And here's why on my swing. I think it's quicker feedback versus like a series of decisions. But I think it translates, very similar from golf to, business or life.
So let's talk about the growth at Better Agency and just kind of how that's gone along. How did you start? What did the start of Better Agency look like?
Yeah. So when I left football, I ended up in Infusionsoft. I was there for a while, kind of moved up from customer success into some custom teams and then eventually into product. And then I decided to leave in 2016. That was kind of the start of like my entrepreneurship journey. I left in 2016 and started what I would kind of label a tech-enabled services company. We're doing integration work and implementation work of It could have been Infusionsoft, HubSpot, Salesforce even. And then during that time, that's why I stumbled into the insurance space. I started working with one insurance agent, referred us to another. Over the span of a couple of years, worked with a lot of them, implementing very similar, if not exactly the same type of workflows. And what I realized is like, as much as we're solving these really core problems these insurance agencies were having, we're also creating just as many: multi-system chaos, dual data entry, multiple points of failure. And so I decided we were in some other verticals. And so I basically walked away from that company in 2018, had a little bit of freedom to kind of work on different projects. And I kind of just stumbled back into wanting to create this CRM sales automation platform for independent insurance agencies. And so in 2019, I started building that, and we kind of went through that evolution of building through 2019, basically the whole year, and eventually launched it right at the beginning of 2020. But that was kind of the stepping stone from going from football to Infusionsoft, and then from there into, how did I end up starting a software company in the insurance space?
What, as you reflect back on the last couple of years, what are some things that you might have done differently, or lessons learned where you're like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that, or I wish I would have known this going into it?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think the easy ones are, especially when you're in a vertical market and you start solving one thing, going back to, hey, talk to 10 customers, you don't need to talk to 100, talk to 10. There's a point of diminishing returns. But it's like, all right, hey, if we could just do this too, this would be so much more valuable. And you fall on this trap of building a massive footprint software, which is great until it's not anymore. And if I could go back and give myself, and I'm very grateful for everything we've done at Better Agency and continue to do so. But if I were to do it again, I would focus on a very niche product that does one little thing extremely, extremely well, instead of trying to build, for a lack of better term, a HubSpot specifically for insurance agents that's massively vast. Trying to stand that up in just a matter of a couple of years is a challenge.
Why do we get trapped in this scope creep challenge? Like, what's the thing that pulls us into
scope creep? Yeah, I think there's a multitude of reasons of why. I think one of it is like you're just trying, when you go into things, you just say, I want to solve problems. Well, people present more problems, you try to solve them. And what especially as a first-time founder in the SaaS space, it's like you don't realize the problems that are still going to come based off the problems you already solved by just adding more users and things like that. Like you're not well aware enough. And so you just start solving more and more problems. And now all of a sudden you got something much larger. I think too is a lot of people, including myself in this scenario, not starting with the end in mind, not saying this is what I'm going to set out and build, and I'm just going to kind of just build along the way, lacking very concrete goals and milestones to say, these are the steps in order to get to that end, to where I'm trying to take this. Not having those clearly defined allowed us to kind of operate off of whatever whim I was feeling at the time.
So how do you think about goals from a short-term, medium-term, and long-term perspective? Or do you think about goals in that context?
It's a good question. I don't know that I put hard timelines around my goals. I have my kind of personal and professional goals.
Yeah.
My timelines were always kind of built for me with football because there was a natural evolution to seasons, and hey, you're at this age, this is the next step, right? So like there was always kind of a timeline built for me, so I didn't necessarily have to do that myself. I think we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish within a 3 to 6 month timeline, and I think we tend to underestimate what we can accomplish in a 1 to 3 year timeline. That's been my experience. So I tend to put some generic timeframes, but I do look at less goals and more what are my priorities right now? I kind of look at like my 1 to 3 year plan, and those are my goals. But on the shorter term, I tend to look at what are my priorities and what are the habits that I have that are either feeding or taking away from those priorities, and are those priorities leading to my larger goals? And that kind of goes back to the personal accountability and the habits that I've created. I'm very intentional about my time and my calendar, saying, okay, are my daily habits feeding my current priorities? And those are priorities aligned to what I'm trying to achieve by 2024, for example.
So you had mentioned principles. What are your guiding principles?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was actually just working on those the other day. But, some of the things that principle-wise or guiding value-wise, it's that I'm a big reader of like Stoic philosophy. And so there's the 4 kind of pillars of justice, wisdom, courage, and temperance. And so to me, those all mean different things. But one is try to do the right thing. You're going to do something, do it right. I try to show up in my life especially in my family, but to really with everybody with love, grace, and positive intent, like be the example that I always wish I kind of had. Like I don't view myself as somebody that has like a mentor or this figure that I can always go to, or I'm trying to achieve, or like, hey, I'm trying to like mimic their life. But how can I live my life to be that example that I would want to have right now? Those are the things that I kind of think about on a regular basis.
These are super, super, super hard things to kind of work through. Like but they sound simple relative to the areas of focus and creating those guiding lights. But as you go through, it is still hard work because of so many of the challenges that come up. And that's why guiding principles are so important to me. And if you're not reading the Stoics, or if you have not gotten into some of Ryan Holiday's work around the obstacle is the way, ego is the enemy, and that's one of my biggest.
Obstacle is the way is the reason I even read. I was not a big reader my entire life. I did not read, and I remember I read Obstacle is the way, and this is probably back in like I don't know. This has got to be back in like 2016.
Cool,
probably, and like I read that book, and that kicked off me completely changing how much I read, like from not reading to reading 20 plus books a year. That was like a big transformation at that time for me, because I didn't read it all. In 2016, I think I read like 20 books.
Awesome.
Because of that Ryan Holiday Obstacle is the Way book. And it also kicked off my obsession with Stoic philosophy, as well as I probably do have every Ryan Holiday book all the way back to his like marketing and sales books too.
That kind of work can help create a level of clarity and focus that will help you move mountains. And I want to chat through a bit about some of the lessons learned relative to just some of the other endeavors that you have going on as a family. Like just kind of as you think about diverse income streams and where you start to put time, energy, and resource, mental capacity, money, etc. What are some of how do the patterns that you've identified in both the work with Better Agency, the stuff that you did playing football, the challenges as you've gone through life, how does that apply to your thesis around investment and what's next?
Yeah, I have I'm going to call it a little bit of a weird relationship with like money.
Okay.
In terms of my father had a mindset of money is the cheapest commodity in the world. And so freely spend money, which drove my mom crazy as like an intentional saver, which is kind of how my wife is. And I'm kind of the same way. I kind of see the duality of it. Like I have a little bit of that, like, hey, it is our cheapest commodity. Like time is more important to me. Relationships is more important to me. Things like that.
Yeah. But
I don't like to, I will purposely not buy anything so I can go invest it somewhere else. And I learned that from football. Like I had to be probably one of the few players in the NFL at the time that was basically didn't have a car. Like I remember for a period of 6 months, I lived at the Marriott Hotel at the Philadelphia airport because the team would pay for that. And I just had them shuttle me in every day because they would pay for that too. And I didn't have a car or a house. I didn't have any expenses like outside of my food, which I ate every single meal that I could at the facility because I never knew how long I understood that I was low man on the totem pole. So I never knew when my career would come to an end. Yeah. But like I saved every single dollar that I possibly could. I just didn't spend any money. So now we've made really good decisions in like our real estate portfolio and even our income of trying to diversify and reinvest in different areas. We've created a family fund that, my wife manages along with her brother. And, we own a chain of different investment portfolios. So there could be real estate. We have some small businesses like nail salons, things like that they basically pay for themselves to continue to operate. And then we're able to there's some income that comes to us, but most of it's just reinvest into building continuing to build a portfolio there. Cause I always wanted, I don't know. I was always obsessed. Like I felt like my family gave me so much in terms of like the space, the lessons, the mindset of life that I think is invaluable. And so I obviously want to give that to my girls and my family, but I was like, well, what if I was able to give them something that said, now you don't have to worry about the financial aspects of it. Like what could you go create? Like what if you had literally every opportunity in the world, what would you go do? And not really with any expectation of them, but more just a curiosity, like what would you do? Because I don't think most of us can work from that space of if money wasn't an issue and you had that kind of mindset, what would you go create? Like how I even start Better Agency, like how I would start it today versus 3 years ago. A lot of it has do with what I know now. Because I feel like I'm a different person every 3 months. I feel like that's how fast I grow and how things accelerate. But also like from a financial aspect, like what would I do differently now? And what would I do to create versus what I did previously and how I went about doing it? So like it's more of just a curiosity, almost like a life experiment to me. But I am obsessed with like trying to build a bigger imprint and a bigger footprint for my family.
It's really cool to hear the way you think both about level of effort relative to the work that gets done and outworking everybody in the room, the importance of process and continuing to work the process, the importance of letting things go and moving on quickly, because you can burn a lot of time and energy and resource doing a lot of things that aren't making that impact, and how each of those things have come together to help you be in the position that you are to start better agency, operate better agency, and continue to build out the portfolio. Well, you've seen me in person. You know that I've never played professional football. My football career ended in high school, but now we're at that same space where our athletic careers have come together and we both are out on a golf course. As we're going through this process, there are people thinking about, hey, we're talking about building a business. We're talking about family funds. We're talking about creating this opportunity for kids who are young, who will be able to do whatever it is that they want to do ideally. You might be thinking, all right, well, the NFL guy, you came out of the NFL with millions of dollars just sitting there in the bank for you to deploy in different places. What's the reality?
The reality was I was probably at 10,000 there at best from my experience. Like, the average career is 2.7 years. I didn't play that. I played half of that. Average first year salary is like 400 to 450, half of which is all go to taxes. And that's assuming you play every week, right? Like I did not. On some weeks I was there, some weeks I weren't. I was. So your average football player is probably 100,000. Very rarely do any of them make $1 million in their career. The top 10 to 15 guys on a team, sure. Most guys are 100,000. I was probably a 10,000, and that went to a lot of buying our first house or our wedding or whatever it was, because those things were important to me. And so, I didn't come out of the NFL with some kind of massive pool of resources. What a lot of it was is I came away with some levels of discipline. And I was able to apply those to my work experience. And I was able to gain, I think over the last, I guess it's been almost 10 years since I've been out of the NFL, like a massive amount of knowledge over the last 10 years that's allowed me to, go and try different things and fail in a lot of different areas. And I think the interesting part is like when you look at human nature, like we were to go back thousands of years, we were community members, right? We were hunters, we were gatherers, we participated. So like, I don't have this desire to like kick back, maybe necessarily do nothing. Like I think I always want to serve and providing some kind of value. I think there's a human nature there. And so I look at it like before kids, like I had all this time, but I didn't necessarily fill the time. Now it's like I have no time and I'm definitely filling the time. And I still find time to like golf and do some of these things I really want to do. But that's the reason I'm up at 4:30 and the reason I'm going to bed at 9. And I maximize that time as much as possible to focus on better agency, to focus on my personal, but physical, mental, emotional health, spend time with my wife and my kids and get some golf in. How we were able to start the fund was basically off of, some crazy ideas of investing in some businesses, as well as utilizing different programs out there like conventional as well as SBA loans to acquire different businesses. And we were able to start going after things that made some sense that maybe people were overlooking and supplying some of the knowledge that I had and my wife has, who's in marketing, and my brother-in-law has, who's in operations, and saying, all right, we can take more of a tech focus and apply this into maybe a non-tech industry and see if that works out. And so for me, we were able to start some of this, kind of the family fund / investment portfolio based off of not having a bunch of money, but having kind of some knowledge and, willing to take a risk. I'm pretty open to risk. I have no problem putting everything on the line, and it's worked out for us, and we've made some mistakes, but we've learned a lot. So yeah, that's kind of how we got into it. It wasn't like, hey, we've got millions of dollars, let's go play around and try to find it. It was like, no, we're gonna potentially leverage our house and take out some equity from our home and different things and put that into different places, and then keep leveraging that. And all of a sudden, we built up something that has some real value.
How do you work through the process of forgiving yourself after you make a mistake?
I don't look at it as a mistake. I look at it as just like a lesson learned. I have a harder time when I make a genuine mistake. Like I probably shouldn't have spoke to my wife that way, right? Like that's a lot harder for me than like in work. And it's like, yeah, like I don't look at it as a mistake. I look at it as a learning experience of like, and there's so many famous quotes on this and famous stories and like Ben Franklin and some of these guys. It's like, so I don't need to probably talk about that, but I do genuinely feel like it's not a mistake. It's I've learned something else. Now I'm able to look at it differently, and things are never as bad or ever as good as you think they are. So even when you think shit's hit the fan, it's like, well, all right, well, what do we do now? And you take everything you have available at your fingertips and you make the best decision you can. And maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. And now you can reevaluate and say, was that the right decision given everything I knew at the time? Maybe it was, it just still didn't work out. That's, kind of you kind of got to, that's falling in love with the process and finding beauty in the game of like, it may just not work out. And you've got to accept the fact that that's okay. That's kind of the beauty of it.
What's resonating for me is what's next and keep moving forward.
Right. Yeah. Like there's nothing you can necessarily do about it. So I don't really view it as a mistake as much as this was an experience for me to learn. And now how much better am I? This is why I love Better Agency. It's like who I am today versus who I was 3 months ago. I think when in my old careers would have taken me to get that transformation, that difference of who I am as a person, I think would have taken me 2 years. So if I'm able to compound that and I'm, in a Better Agency for 3 years, like I've grown more. To grow as much as I have in 3 years would have taken me, 20 years of my professional career previous to Better Agency. And that's ultimately why I love my job, is just how fast I'm able to go through things, learn. It's kind of being constantly under the pressure cooker a little bit. And I think, at times you can burn out with that. But again, if you can fall in love with the process, you can really leverage that.
And when you work the process, it's amazing what can happen in a short period of time, like a 90-day period of time. Like just looking at that in the context of quarterly sprints or something to that effect. Well, awesome conversation. Where can people find out more about what you're working on? Where do you want people to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm not active on Facebook or Instagram. You can find me on Twitter, WShaw_9, or LinkedIn, WillShaw8. Those are probably my two most active platforms. I'm not super active on LinkedIn, but Twitter I think is fun. So I'm usually on there checking out basketball and golf stuff, and occasionally tweeting about football and business.
It's awesome to see Will break down plays and break down certain things that are happening in football on his Twitter account. So make sure you follow him there. We'll include links in the show notes. If you know someone who would enjoy this conversation, get something out of it, share it with them. Let Will and I know both via LinkedIn and Twitter. We like to see those shares. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?